Hello, I'm Dave. This is my wife,
Tina.
and we're with Bible First 5-Minute Bible Study. We're with you today outside in Bexley, Ohio, and today we are in Acts 18, starting at verse 1. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth, and he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. And he went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked. This is Paul we're talking about, of course, for they were tent makers by trade. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. In verse 5, when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that the Christ was Jesus. And when they opposed and reviled him, he shook out his garments and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on I will go to the Gentiles." In verse 7, and he left there and went to the house of a man named Titus, Justus, a worshiper of God. His house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord, together with his entire household, and many of the Corinthians, hearing Paul, believed and were baptized. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent." In verse 10, "For I am with you. No one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people." And he stayed 1 year and 6 months teaching the word of God among them. Verse 12, "But when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, 'This man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law.' But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, 'If it were a matter of wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. But since it is a matter of questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of these things.' And he drove them from the tribunal." In verse 17, "And they all seized Stephanas, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal, but Gallio paid no attention to any of this." Paul's among the Jews in Corinth. He's preaching the word, Tina, telling them about Jesus, and they didn't like it. And they fought with him, argued with him, mocked him, blah, blah, blah. So finally Paul got frustrated, right? And Paul's like, "Look, I want nothing to do with you all anymore. I'm going to go talk to the Gentiles. Let your sin be on you, and you're accountable for yourself, right? I'm wiping my hands with you, right? I'm going over here." And so he started preaching to the Gentiles, and the Lord told him, "Don't worry, nobody's going to hurt you here." I came to him in a dream. He stayed there 1.5 years. So my assumption, tell me if you think that's wrong, is he had a heart for the people, right? You know, God put it in his heart, and he was having fruit, right? We know that some of the people in the synagogue were believing. You know, we know that he was right next to the synagogue teaching, right? And he found some people. Rome had kicked the Jews out of, the Romans had kicked the Jews out of Rome. So he met a couple of tent maker friends and started working with them. Because Paul, his whole thing was, even though he felt he was entitled to a living from the church, he did not want to be a burden on the church, so he always earned his own way.
Right.
You know, and he mentions that in numerous epistles. It's like, hey, you know, the Bible says don't muzzle the ox, and you guys, I could ask you for everything, but I've never asked you for nothing.
Right.
I cover my own way, and a lot of times he covered part of their way, you know, because he was a successful tent maker.
Right.
And, you know, I just think it's cool now if you think of this and you go and you read Corinthians, you kind of get why Paul interacted with it. This was like his church.
Right.
You know, he wrote 2 epistles to Corinthians.
Right.
You know, that was his church. And he knew the people there. He knew the people by name, right? When he had heard rumors that this person was living this way or that he knew those people, you know? And so, like I said, that was, you could tell, one, also the thickness of 1st and 2nd Corinthians, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, he you know, this was a church that he really, really cared about. And he loved these people. And God made him a shepherd over these people for as long as he was there. The Jews then tried to kind of get him kicked out of there, saying, hey, you need to do something about this guy. He's breaking our religious laws. And the Roman guy's like, I don't want to hear about that crap. Right? That's for you all to determine. If he was stealing or robbing or murdering, okay. But if this is just about words,
right,
I don't want to hear this. You know, I'm too busy to deal with your arguments, you know, your theology differences, you know. Because to the Romans, too, all the gods were pretty much equal.
Right.
You know, they believed in any god they came across in the Roman Empire became one of their gods. So when they would take a city and that city was worshiping, you know, a titmouse, well, then that would be what they build a little temple somewhere, and they do, you know, and
those different gods did different things, right?
Yeah, but then a lot of the gods were geographic and things like that too, you know. One of the reasons the Romans didn't get too hard, because one of their rules was you can worship any god you want, but you have to honor these gods too, and you have to honor Caesar as if he is God. Right? Well, the Jews wouldn't do that. But because Rome really was fixated on ancient things. So Roman Empire looked a lot at Greece and stuff like that, and their art and their, you know, how their government worked and different things. Well, the Jews were a very old religion, so they had respect for that. And that was one of the reasons why they didn't force and just level it at the beginning. They're like, look, we'll let you have your God, let you worship your way. But nobody else in the empire, for the most part, was treated that way.
Right.
You know, road come rolling into your town, and it's like, okay, I'm worshiping this, but now on Sunday we're building a temple to Zeus, you know, or we're building an effigy to Caesar. And once a year, you got to come and burn incense to Caesar, you know, because to them, like I said, to them, all the gods were equal,
right?
You know, and so they didn't really care what you worship. There were Romans that they may just focus on Venus, and there'd be a temple for Venus, you know, and then there was another one, you know, the sailors might focus on Poseidon. And have a temple for Poseidon, because to them, Poseidon ruled the oceans, you know.
Right.
So, like I said, to Rome, they were almost, not always, but some of their people were almost, I would say, agnostic in how they represented their gods, right? That they felt there was a value to them, but it was more of a lip service, right? You placated them. Society demanded it, and also why upset the apple cart, right? Why take a chance? I don't really know if this guy's a god, but you know, hey, if I'm going to squash a buck for him, what do I care?
Go along to get
along. Whereas the Jews, they died for their faith. They died. They knew their God was the only God.
Right.
You know, so they're not going to sit there and play around and say, okay, yeah, we'll give lip service to your gods.
Well, they knew they were believing in the true God.
Right. And so, like I said, so it's interesting. You know, that was one of the things I've always wondered is, like, with the ancient Greeks and things, like, how many of them actually, like, really believed Zeus was up on that mountain and things. You know, there's all kinds of different theories as to, you know, how some of the people were extremely religious, you know, but a lot of it was like an ecstatic worship anyways, you know, like the mystery religions and stuff like that. It was more about getting yourself whipped up into a frenzy as a celebration for God, you know, or, oh, you know, we're going to, you know, honor the goddess of wine, so then we get drunk and have orgies, you know, and so it gave people a good excuse to do bad things sometimes.
Right.
You got any questions, Tina?
No, I don't think so. Not this time.
Hey, we haven't been on for a really long time. I've been dealing with a lot of medical stuff.
We've been missing you.
We
hope you've been missing us.
We've been missing you. I've had a wound for the last 8-9 months. It's really bad. I would show you pictures of it, but it'll get blocked on YouTube. It's now finally starting to heal a little bit. I've been going in at least once a week for debridements and cauterizations, and, you know, they got this cast thing on me, and, you know, I've been having heart problems, praying that the Lord's going to provide money so I can get my heart surgery. Tina's been doing pretty good. She hasn't been in the hospital. We've been doing pretty good, though. Like I said, you know, Satan keeps throwing stuff at us, but
we'll keep praying for you if you keep praying for David.
Right, and we've been praying for you all this time.
Yeah.
And we missed you, and we hopefully will be getting a little bit more on track. Okay, God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.